Good morning, everyone. I'm calling to order this hearing of the Minnesota Senate Taxes Committee, Tuesday, February 24th at 9:50 a.m. The minutes are in your packets. Are there any corrections or additions? Seeing none, the minutes stand approved as presented. The first item on our agenda is to welcome the state auditor. What we're going to do today is to have State Auditor Blaha introduce the TIF financing report of the past year, and then to turn it over to Mr. Nord, who is the director of the TIF division. Welcome to the committee, Auditor Blaha.
Thank you, Chair Rest. Thank you, Senators. What a great way to start the day, little tax increment finance legislative report. And so we'll basically be going through that, and also particular note for Senator Nelson, we are also going to show our progress on our dashboards, which is something I know that you have tracked carefully. So in short, revenue is up a bit, new certifications are down a bit, and we have the trend of quicker decertifications is continuing. And with that, I'm going to turn it right over to the expert, if that's the chair's wish, Director Jason Nord.
Yes. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Nord, and we are looking forward to the presentation of the
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm Jason Nord, TIF Division Director at the Office of the State Auditor, and I'm happy to be here today to present highlights from our 2024 TIF Annual Legislative Report. So it's a 2024 report because the 2024 activity is reported and reacted to in 2025, and so we're reviewing last year's oversight activity. I'll start with just a quick reminder of how tax increment financing affects property taxes. Normally, when you have new development created by private development, it immediately becomes part of the tax base. But when tax increment financing is used, the new value that's created is captured for the life of the district and does not become part of the tax base until after the TIF district ends. So while the TIF district is active, only that original value remains part of the tax base. And so the taxes on that new value, which are the tax increments, they're used to pay debt instruments that enable the development to occur. And so TIF is not a tool that's inherently good or inherently bad. It kind of depends on how you're using it. If you're using it for a project that would not happen but for the assistance, then TIF is a great tool. You're just delaying the benefit of the new tax base until the TIF district ends. But if you're using TIF for things that would happen anyway, now you're capturing part of tax base that should otherwise help contribute to property tax levies. And so as part of creating a TIF district, authorities are required to make that but-for finding, and you have public notice and public hearing requirements that are the oversight for that judgment call that they make at the beginning of the life of a TIF district. So the use of TIF is pretty widespread all across the state. There's 373 TIF authorities, and in 2024 we had reporting for 1,657 TIF districts across the state. This chart shows you a count for statewide greater Minnesota and the metro area of the different types of TIF districts, and it also shows the maximum duration. So the top three, the main three districts that are used most often, making up 97% of all TIF districts, are redevelopment districts, housing districts, and economic development districts. There are two other statutory types of districts. Renewal and renovation districts are very similar to a redevelopment district. It's just that their blight test is more land use oriented. And then the soils condition districts are used when a parcel is polluted. You'll see there's one pre-79 district, a TIF district that was created before the TIF Act was enacted in 1979. It was still reporting through this year because it just in 2024 spent its last dollars, so it won't be appearing again in the future. And then the uncodified districts are those types of TIF districts that don't have a normal type because they were created by a special legislation for specific purposes, and there are 11 of those. And then the number under the total lines there is hazardous substance subdistricts. If you create a regular TIF district, like a redevelopment district or something, and you run into pollution that needs to be addressed, you can create a subdistrict that would then use that existing part of the tax base to help remedy the pollution that's encountered. And there are 20 of those subdistricts in 2024. And it might be interesting to note that 61% of all TIF districts are actually located outside the metro in greater Minnesota. Here's kind of two pie charts that show the metro and greater Minnesota, so you can compare. In both cases, redevelopment districts are the predominant type, but you can see in the metro, redevelopment districts and sort of those lesser common districts are used far more often compared to greater Minnesota, where housing districts and economic development districts are more prevalent in usage. This district then shows the amount of revenue dollars associated with TIF. And there's $261 million of tax increment for 2024, which was a bit of an increase over 2023. Unlike the counts, most of the dollars of tax increment are generated in the metro. Almost 80% of revenue is generated in the metro area. And I think that's because valuations are higher in the metro and because the scale of projects often tends to be a little bit larger in the metro. And then here again are the pie charts that kind of illustrate that. In both cases, the predominant amount of funds is in redevelopment districts, but there's far more usage of housing and economic development districts outside the metro. It's also noteworthy that $16.8 million of tax increment was returned in 2024. And so when increment isn't needed and it's returned, it gets redistributed to the county, the city, and the school district in which the TIF district is located. This is a chart that shows the history of TIF using both our office's data and for older years, the Department of Revenue data. The blue line is actual dollars and the gold line is constant dollars. And you can see that the use of TIF really was skyrocketing early in the history of TIF. And so it was in the late 1980s and in 1990 in particular, where a lot of the controls were put into place that tried to rein in and moderate the use of TIF a bit. And we did witness that. The big drop for 2022 reflects the result of tax reform in 2001, where there was huge class rate compression that almost took about a third of all tax increment that disappeared with that class rate compression. But the amount of increment continued to rise until it peaked again in about 2008. And then after 2008, we saw that all these early districts, which tended to be much larger, they started to decertify. And so the amount of tax increment revenues started dropping until about 2014, 2016, in that time frame, when it seemed to moderate a little bit, and now it's kind of resumed an upward trajectory, but for maybe a little bit of dip after the pandemic years. This is a similar chart that just shows the number of TIF districts that have been in existence for the years that the OSA is at oversight of TIF reporting. The peak in the count actually occurred a little bit earlier than the peak in the dollars in about 2004. And again, we saw a decline because all those old districts that were created before the reforms hit their decertification, their maximum time frame, and started decertifying. And you can see here that we've seemed to reach an equilibrium of right around 1,650 districts. Seems to be about the norm for TIF usage across the state. This chart shows both new certifications in the blue line, and the dotted gold line is the decertifications that have happened over the last 10 years. And I think what's interesting here is certifications are down a little bit over the last 3 years, which is, you know, much lower than in the preceding 10 years. So that usage is down a little bit, which is interesting. And this chart,
Excuse me, Mr.
Sure.
Nord, do you speculate on why that has happened?
you know, I don't have any special insight. I think my speculation maybe is with high interest rates or maybe causing people to hold off on some development. And so maybe some of those projects are kind of in a holding pattern here based on economic uncertainty, but that's just pure speculation, so.
Thank you.
Here we see the different types of debt that TIF districts use. The most common type of TIF debt is pay-as-you-go notes. And then again, there's $1.9 billion of TIF debt for 2024. 73% of that is for pay-as-you-go notes. And with a pay-as-you-go note, the developer finances their project and they get reimbursed each year as they pay their property taxes. So the increment share of their property taxes is reimbursed to them to pay for the costs that they financed. And with this approach, the risk is borne by the developer. So if the project doesn't take off like they expected it to, or increments are lower than they expected, then it's the developer that's bearing that risk and not taxpayers. General obligation bonds used to be far more prevalent, but their usage has declined over the years, which is probably a good thing. It shows that municipalities across the state are trying to limit risks to their taxpayers. There's also various revenue bonds and interfund loans. Interfund loans is, you know, when you're borrowing from a different fund of the authority. Generally, that's not used to finance a whole TIF district, although that's happened a few times. It's mostly for administrative costs. And so it makes up about 10% of TIF debt. And since administrative costs are capped at 10% of TIF, that kind of makes some sense. Here's a chart that shows that trend over the last 10 years. You can see the use of pay-as-you-go notes has really been taken off, mostly at the expense of general obligation bonds. And we've seen a little bit of maybe a slight rise in the amount of interfund loans, with other debt being less common. And then the trend
Madam
of
Chair.
early
Mr. Nord, excuse me. Why is it that developers have become more, I'm trying to find the right word, satisfied or interested in pay-as-you-go, where they, as you mentioned, are the ones taking the risk?
I don't know that it's driven, Madam Chair, I don't know that that's driven necessarily by what the developers want. It might be more that the authorities are only willing to provide
see.
the pay-as-you-go assistance. And I think, you know, generally whenever a project becomes borne by taxpayers, it maybe raises the level of scrutiny. And so I think it may be more largely driven by the authorities than by the developers, but there may be a sense of, since it's become so prevalent, it maybe has become the new norm.
Thank you. Senator Dibble, you have a question or a comment?
Thank you. You anticipated my inquiry a little bit.
Okay.
I was curious about this pay-as-you-go, characterized as the developer bearing the risk. In some sense, I'm just trying to understand how pay-as-you-go works. Obviously, the infrastructure that's being improved needs to be improved today. Is this the case where the developer finances the improvement and then the repayment comes from the TIF resources?
Mr. Nord?
Madam Chair, Senator Dibble, that's correct, yep. So generally, the contract is written between the authority and the developer, where the only obligation to pay the developer for costs is from their property taxes as they make those property tax payments. So usually they're reimbursed twice a year, coinciding with the two property tax due dates. So they're often paid, for example, August 1st and February 1st as they're making their first and second half property tax payments. And those are the only obligation of the authority is to make payments from those sources, not from any general tax dollars.
Senator Dibble?
So thank you. So then, if in fact those resources don't materialize for whatever reason, is the developer has the obligation then to find other resources to satisfy the financing.
Mr. Nord?
Madam Chair, Senator Dibble, that's correct. And so whereas like if you had financed the TIF district with the general obligation bond and things go sideways and that increment isn't there, now all of a sudden the taxpayers are on the hook for those costs, whereas.
It goes right to the property tax payers.
Yeah, it goes right to the property tax levies to pay those general obligation bonds. And so it would be the developer who would be scrambling to find those resources in that case.
Thank you. I have one more question,
Senator Dibble?
somewhat related, and you might not be able to answer. I'm thinking of the circumstance of, well, one in particular, but a number of instances where there was, when I worked at the city of Minneapolis, there was, public improvements that needed to be made as a consequence of a traffic study or something like that. There was no TIF that paid for those improvements. The developer simply had to pay for those improvements, like a new intersection with stoplights, for example. How does that determination get made? That so there was no implication for the taxpayer paying for those improvements. That was completely the developer's obligation to make those improvements in order to support that development at that site. Is that just something that occurs in the process of a negotiation between the municipality and the proposer? Or is there something else that's operative in those, to make those kinds of determinations? Which kinds of public realm infrastructure improvements would be made to support a development that would then be supported by TIF or just be paid for by the developer? Do you know? And if you don't, that's fine.
Yeah.
Mr. Nord?
Madam Chair and Senator Dibble, yeah, that happens a little outside of my view, but I do believe that it is part of kind of the negotiation of, where maybe a developer comes forward and says, we're interested in this site, and maybe the authority or the city says, okay, well, if you're going to build that here, then, you need to be responsible for these costs. So if we're going to approve the use of TIF, it has to include whatever scope, so I think it is part of that negotiation. And I think some TIF projects are more led by the authority of the municipality, and other projects maybe are more led by an eager developer. So I think the possibilities can kind of run the gamut, and can be pretty simple and straightforward to be, very complex and involved, so.
Okay, thank you. So, Madam Chair, so
Senator Dibble?
in summary, it just depends on who has the leverage. It's a negotiation.
I think so.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Nord, continue. And Auditor Blaha, I am aware that you have another obligation. Are you able to stay for a little longer, or do you need to leave now?
I can stay a little longer. I'm mostly here just if anybody is mad about anything, that's on me. And if you're happy about things, that's on him. So I am available for a bit more.
Okay, thank you, thank you, Auditor Blaha. Mr. Nord, continue.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thanks. So yeah, early decertification is one of the things that I really like to track and pay attention to. So, TIF districts can run 26 years for redevelopment and economic and housing, and shorter for economic development districts. But just because they can last that long doesn't mean they necessarily should. And what we've seen over the years is there's been an increasing trend towards early decertification. And we kind of track that in like 5-year periods. So looking at decertifications that have happened over the last 5 years, how many of those districts lasted their full duration versus how many decertified early. And we're seeing like 73, 72% of housing and redevelopment districts decertifying early. And in that last column, it shows on average, those that are decertifying early are decertifying 10 years early. So there's other additional charts besides this one. I didn't really want to beat you over the head with it, but there's additional charts in the report that show more detail on this, if you're interested in that. But just to kind of drive home the point kind of illustratively, if this is kind of a model of what a TIF district is, where once the TIF district starts, the new value is captured and is producing tax increments. And if it goes its full duration, maximum duration, it might be collecting a lot of increment over a long period of time. So you might ask the question, well, are you collecting more increment than is necessary to make this project happen? Or is this TIF district running longer than is necessary to make the project happen? And whereas if you decertified, once you received enough increment to pay for necessary costs, then you get that new value back on the tax base, on the tax rolls quicker, and it is more, more of an appropriate usage of TIF. And I think it's the 5-year rule and the 6-year rule that are the primary drivers of this. I think in some respects, authorities just want this to happen. Others maybe don't pay as close attention to that. But the 5 or 6-year rule was set up to, the 5-year rule tries to identify what necessary costs are, and the 6-year rule says once you have enough increment for those necessary costs, you have to decertify. And so that's a good trend that we've seen continue. And so that's kind of the highlights of the legislative report. So we just wanted to show you quickly that we've got some new dashboards live on our website. So you can find more information out there. You can find them under our reports and data analysis menu on our main page. And so there's 6 different dashboards that identify compliance with reporting requirements, and 2 of those are related to tax increment financing. So you can see who's getting their reporting done and whether they're on time or whether they're late. And then there's 2 other data dashboards, one related to fire relief associations and one related to tax increment financing, where we've mapped data by type of district. I'll show you that here. So there's kind of 2 different panes. If you click on the map tab, the map on the left side of the screen here, you can actually zoom all the way in or zoom all the way out. And the pane on the right changes depending on what is being zoomed in on. And then for each TIF authority, there's a little circle graph. The larger the circle graph, the more TIF districts they have. And that circle graph shows the makeup of the different types of TIF districts that they have. And so if you click on an authority, a box will pop up that shows the counts of districts by district type. So Alexandria here has 30 districts, 17 of them are housing, 7 are redevelopment, 6 are economic development. And then there's another tab, and then up at the top you can select whatever authority you want. If you want to just zoom to a specific authority, and you can select different types of districts that you want to look at. Then on the second tab of this dashboard, if you click on the TIF Authority Details tab and you select an authority, here I've selected Ada, the top pane shows a list of all their TIF districts. And when you click on one of those districts, the bottom pane fills with some TIF details. And this doesn't show a lot of it. If you scroll down, you'd see many other of the stats related to those districts. So if you wanted to check out who's using TIF in your districts and how much TIF they're using and what kind of districts, and you can browse a lot of this detail. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to allow you to download reports through this, but we aren't quite there yet. But hopefully you'll find that a useful tool in exploring TIF usage in your districts. So, and with that, that's kind of the conclusion of our report. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nord and Auditor Blaha. I'm really impressed with the level of sophistication now in information that is available at the state auditor's website on tax increment. It is a very, very useful tool for local governments. And who developed this software?
I can't remember. No, I'm just
Was it
spacing the name of
in-house?
We work with the,
Auditor Blaha, was it in-house? Was
Madam
it
Chair.
Mr. Nord? Was it other of your staff?
yeah, we work with the University of Minnesota, actually. I'm not sure the exact name of their office or their group, but they had some ArcGIS knowledge and some experience creating dashboards for different state entities, and so they helped us out.
And were they using artificial intelligence as one of the resources to produce these reports?
Maybe if I can speak to that. Madam Chair.
Auditor Blaha.
Thank you. This is not and no generative AI is necessary for this.
Okay,
This is
thank
not even machine learning, frankly. But it's the same group that we used for our water infrastructure tool. And so we went back to the University of Minnesota, used their team, and they built it out together so that it can also take our data live. And that was one of the things that has updated. But yeah, this is not fancy yet, though we are, though I can say our office is pursuing some additional work that may include AI to make sure our data is in a place that y'all will be able to use it even further.
Thank you. Senator Dibble, did you have a further comment or question?
Thank you. I have two questions.
Sure.
One is, I meant to ask at the time, the 11 non-codified districts, what do those pertain to, or what are their purpose? Do we know?
Madam Chair, Senator Dibble, shoot,
Nord.
I was going to make note of that. There's a couple of them that apply to like 3 or 4 cities. I think one was a housing replacement district. It was one of those where instead of just identifying like a block and doing a project on a block, it was more like some scattered site housing. There was a handful of cities, I want to say Fridley, Minneapolis, Robbinsdale or something. I don't remember the exact list, but there's a handful of cities that do that. There's just a few, I think there's just a few different, most of them are related to housing as I recall, but I'm sorry I didn't prepare that. I can get that to you.
Thank you. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, and Senator Dibble, like, over the years, we have encountered extremely complex developments that the general TIF laws, although they can be followed, they rise above, the project rises above mere inconvenience. And so in order to meet the goals of the cities or the group of cities that are involved, we set aside some of the rules in order to accommodate the good of the cause, quite frankly.
All right, great.
And Minneapolis, by the way, is often involved in that, so
Right.
is Bloomington. I believe Edina has been usually a single city that is using TIF may come in for a couple of exceptions to the general TIF law, but not recreating it in whole cloth kind of thing. So that's where those districts come from. And in my mind, it's better than just setting aside the rules like the Mall of America. It is a redevelopment district, the most valuable land in the whole country at the time. And yet, because there was one dilapidated farm building, it was deemed that it met the but-for test. And so it still, I think, is characterized as a redevelopment district, even as every other year the authority comes in with another wrinkle.
Yep. It's always
Thank you.
very creative,
Yes,
creative ideas around
Yes.
TIF come in every year.
And Madam
Mr. Sure, Senator Drazkowski, and then we'll return to Mr. Nord. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Nord. I don't know if you may have, maybe one of the slides you skipped over, but slide 12 on the bottom of page 6. The housing curve there shows a precipitous decline, obviously, from 2021 through 2024, and I would suspect that interest rates are probably part of that. Probably the regulation that this government continues to pile on to people and people who want to build and do things in this state. Are there any other elements or any other variables that might contribute to that? Have we passed changes to the TIF law regarding housing that may have changed, or are there any other things we should be aware of?
Mr. Nord.
Madam Chair, Senator Drazkowski, thank you for returning me to this. I don't know if I missed this, but yeah, as you might notice here, in what jumps out to me here is from 2010 to 2016, housing trailed both redevelopment and economic development districts. But then from 2018 to 2023, it became the most prevalent type of project, and it really has dropped off recently. And I don't, there hasn't been any particular law changes that would have caused that decline in the start of housing projects. So I think that may have more to do with, I don't know, interest rates or general economic conditions and uncertainty. I don't have any special knowledge as to why that's happening, but that is one of the more interesting things that's kind of jumped up here recently is this kind of drop off in the amount of housing starts. So,
Thank you.
and then, Madam Chair.
Mr. Nord.
Back to Senator Dibble's question a little bit, I did recall that another district type that has had some special has been uncodified is districts related to like gravel pits, soils condition districts, I believe they've been called. There's, I think 3 or 4 authorities who've had special legislation to create those districts. And I'll also point out that the uncodified districts just means that they're not formally a redevelopment district or a housing district or a economic development district. But there are many TIF districts that have benefited from special legislation. So there's been special legislation that has allowed people to create redevelopment districts or economic development districts. I think there's been, the number is in the report, but I think there's about 111 TIF districts that have special legislation attached to them. So the uncodified just means they don't fit into one of those other categories.
Anything further, Senator Dibble?
Sorry to drag this out. I have one more
okay.
question. Again, Mr. Nord may not be able to answer because it may have to be more on the local government side. But one of the critiques of TIF has been that, you know, of course, they're designated and then the resources are used to pay for public infrastructure. And typically, there's financing that goes with that. The bonds are defeased after a certain amount of time, 20 years, I guess, and at some point, the TIF district is decertified, whereupon the original purpose for the TIF, the development itself, oftentimes has kind of run its course and wound down, and so then the jurisdiction doesn't actually realize the benefit of the ongoing collection of those additional resources. And so I'm wondering, how often does that actually happen? Do we have a sense of that? And do we keep an eye on that eventuality, or do local units of government keep an eye on that potentiality when they're looking at establishing the rationale and establishing a TIF district?
Madam Chair and Senator Dibble, that isn't something that we track specifically. Just anecdotally, I am familiar that there have been TIF districts, you know, that have ended only to be followed by a new TIF district because, as you say, that original development ran its course. And I think that was one of the big concerns back in the 80s and 90s that created a lot of the tightening of the TIF rules. Was it just seemed like TIF districts back then automatically went 26 years, paid for everything they could. And now I think the 5-year rule and 6-year rule are really trying to focus people to say, you know, you've got 5 years to figure out what you're going to spend your money on. And then once you spend your money on that activity, you have to decertify. So I don't have any special statistics as to, you know, how much of that reward occurs at the end and how much, you know, degradation of that reward has there been because the TIF district has gone so long, so.
Senator Dibble, also, you know, the original purpose of tax increment was to get rid of blight in the inner cities because otherwise developers would not go there. And that particular purpose, although it created the redevelopment districts, has really fallen aside. And the but-for test is up in the air sometimes, which is why I had that reform legislation last year that we couldn't move forward, but I still think we should. And think further about how meaningful the but-for test is, and I believe it's not very meaningful any longer, and we should be looking at combining the redevelopment district length with the renovation districts, giving them, a longer period of time, but without having to create the fiction that they are removing blight from the inner city. It's just not the way it was as it was in 1970, in the 70s, when TIF was the go-to instrument for attracting development in the inner cities.
Madam Chair, I can point to several examples in my district, but before my time, back when I worked at the city of Minneapolis, where there was a very
Yes.
creative take on what but-for and what blight actually constituted.
When it was
Some of the
meaningful.
nicest corners in the
Yes.
district making use of TIF under the guise of removing blight and under the, kind of fictional notion of but-for. Developments that probably would have occurred anyways, but TIF was used as a mechanism.
Mr. Nord, Auditor Blaha, anything further you would like to add to the committee this morning?
Thank you, Chair Rest and members. Just want to thank you for, again, all your work and attention to this. And also, we encourage you to take a look at the dashboards. And if you have any suggestions for us or things that you wish were there, were changed, we would love to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the report on from the State Auditor's Office, and we will now move to consideration of Senate File 3608. Mr. Nord will stay at the witness table, and I will give the gavel to Senator Halstra.
Madam Chair, introduce yourself and go ahead with the bill.
Okay. Members, I present Senate File 3608. These are recommendations that are coming from the State Auditor's Office to simplify one of the reports that TIF districts, cities have to make with regard to the return of excess tax increment. As you may know, there is, if you have too much of it, you have to give it back. That's primarily what the issue is, and it must be done in an orderly fashion, following some deadlines. So they have to calculate the amount of the excess increment. By the way, if you're looking at or if you care to look at the revenue estimate, it shows 0 because it does not have an impact on the general fund. But now in Section 1 are if the TIF authority determines that there are excess increments, and in Mr. Nord's report, you saw where it pointed those out. When you have more increments than you have costs, et cetera, there is a process where that has to be returned. And that has to be done as of December 31st of every year. Sometimes we have had people who ask, or cities that ask for an exception to doing that, and generally we have said no. But the authority does have to return the excess increments to the county auditor. And if there is not a pay-as-you-go, and we had him discuss that, they must decertify the district. And then two, if you want to put it off, there are certain requirements as well. And looking at line 117 and 18, within 9 months after December 31st, a modification of tax increment financing plan is approved. That could defer it. And the modification increases the total cost authorized to be paid with the increments. It goes on to talk about the expiration of that. I'm not going to read all of it, but there's an orderly process that the state auditor's office is proposing with regard to it that will simplify this process and eliminate some of the complications that otherwise would be placed on the local governments or the TIF district. So essentially, it doesn't change any of the requirements of returning excess increment, but it does simplify the process and the reporting. And I would then, if you have questions about the proposal, I would encourage you to direct them to Mr. Nord. And Mr. Chairman, he can also give a little bit more detail about how their office and making observations about the kinds and the number of reports and lines to fill in that they are suggesting the simplification of the reporting requirement.
Mr. Nord?
Mr. Chair, thank you. The excess increment provision is one of the original provisions in the 1979 TIF Act, and it existed at a time when the 5 and 6 year rule didn't exist. Those didn't come into effect until 1990. And so the original version of excess increment tried to do some of what the 5 and 6 year rule are doing better. And that made the calculation of excess increment very complicated. And so recognizing that the 5 and 6 year rule are doing the job that maybe excess increment was originally drafted to do, we think it can be greatly simplified. And so there's 3 things that we're essentially taking out of the existing law. The existing law is calculated so, and excess increment essentially is when you have more increment than what your plan authorizes you to spend. And the reason why it's complicated now is because there's a provision that says, well, you have to look at what debt is due so far. And so you might preliminarily have excess increment, but you still have debt to pay. So it says, this is excess increment, but it's okay if you use excess increment to pay that debt, which creates an unnecessarily complication, I think. The other thing it asks you to do is look at what are you paying for with other sources. And it used to be that TIF plans would identify the entire project cost. And in 2009, there was a law change that said that TIF plans should only identify what you're going to spend your tax increment on. And so the current statute requires you to figure out what you're paying with other sources when now that TIF plans have been simplified, that doesn't really need to come into the equation. And then this was so complicated that there was a law passed by some of the cities a long time ago that said, we don't even want to have to try to calculate excess increment because it's complicated. So there was a law that said you don't have to try to calculate it unless your costs are more than 20% greater than the increment you've received so far. But now we've automated all of that in our reporting form, so there's no reason to give them a break anymore. And so with this law change, our reporting form on excess increment would go from about 20 lines down to 7. And you would only have to enter information on one of those 7 lines because the other lines would be automatically calculated for you. So we're stripping essentially all of that kind of overburden out of it so that the excess increment simply becomes a provision that says, once you have more increment than what your plan authorizes you to pay, that's excess that you have to repay. And some of the new language at the beginning looks a little complicated because we realize you can amend your TIF plan to increase costs. And so currently, what we're saying is after the end of the year, you have, generally, so for example, for the year 2024, they had to do their reporting in by August 1st of 2025. And the law says you have to return excess increment from the end of 2024 by September 30th of 2025. And in that time period, authorities will often amend their TIF plan to increase authorized costs to try to make the excess increment go away. And they can't make past excess increment go away, but they can make future excess increment go away. So we've added this provision to say that you have to decertify once you start getting excess increment, and you only don't have to decertify if you modify your plan in that timely manner. And so we had to add a bunch of language to try to make that clear and orderly, that process of when can you modify the plan and when does that, when do you have to actually shut down again. So there's a little bit of new language there, but that's what we were trying to accomplish with this provision.
Okay, we'll open it for questions unless, Madam Chair, you had anything else? So Senator Dibble?
Thank you. Why would a local unit kind of game the system, if you will, to hide excess? It sounds like that's what I'm using words you didn't use, but why would they try to show that there is no excess increment? It would seem to me that it's in. I'm seriously a sincere question, because it would seem to me it's in their interest to return excess increment, as you will, because then it would go to general purposes for which the property tax is there. They would realize that that overall benefit rather than keeping it locked into. Is it because cities get to use other jurisdictions' property taxes and they want to just keep that, or what's I'm trying to understand better.
Mr. Chairman, I think at every point with economic development issues and laws, as it refers to, local governments doing it, that they are always looking for maximum flexibility. They're always looking for ways of, if a unexpected event occurs, that economic development initiative can still go forward. So they like having cash reserves over here that can be applied to it, or that they have control, those economic development districts writ large. I don't mean the TIF districts. I don't mean that kind of particular TIF district. It's called an economic development one. So the legislature has, over the years, put certain restrictions. Back in 1991, we made the cities make whole school districts by having what the cities called an LGA penalty. As soon as we were able to overhaul the property tax system with regard to school districts in 2001, that was no longer necessary. And the cities were grateful for that. They didn't have to worry about it. And those kinds of, and then you mentioned the 5- and 6-year rule was another way, even if it was also, quote, gamed, because we have proposals coming in setting aside the 5- and 6-year rules. And when that special legislation comes before us, we have, a lot of questions about why they should be set aside. But this, when we talk about gaming the system, I think we would find local governments taking umbrage at that characterization, quite frankly, and where they're looking at from their point of view, I think, just maximum flexibility within the law, and sometimes being excused from a particular feature of it. But keep in mind that the majority of tax increment districts, we never see anything about them because they do all of it within the law that we have. The special legislation that we see that asks for setting aside the 5- and 6-year rule or ignoring the but-for test or writing the value, the original value down to 0 rather than the increment above what the current value of the land is, and it's not always 0, but we sometimes allow that. Those are the ones that we see here in this committee and in the legislature. So that's a long answer. Maybe since Mr. Nord sees those reports, he has a further comment. But keep in mind, we only see the special legislation. We do not, which asks for exceptions to the law for special reasons in their minds, as opposed to the dozens and dozens of TIF districts that are certified, and sometimes we read about them in the newspaper, quite frankly, but they don't, and we say, how can that be? Because that's a valuable piece of property in this suburb. And then we look at what they did, and it's completely within the law. They don't have to come here and ask for any kind of special consideration. So you can do everything according to the law, not have to come to the legislature, and still be criticized for your project.
Okay. Other question? Mr. Nord, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Senator Dibble. I think one of the reasons why you might commonly see someone amend their plan to increase their authorized costs to not have to, shut down and return excess increment is, a lot of TIF districts are allowed to pool, meaning they're allowed to use a percentage of their increment to be spent outside the district on other projects. And especially housing districts don't have pooling limitations. So there's a lot of housing districts in particular that want to be able to assist other projects that are going around or in the community. And so, one of those districts might be doing well, but they spy some other housing developments that they could also assist. And so if originally maybe they plan to spend, $4 million, but they want to use another $500,000 on another project, they could increase their authorized costs so that they can continue to do some of that pooling on those other projects.
Okay. I just want to point out we're 14 minutes over, so any other questions for the
Yeah,
author? Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Chair.
otherwise, I would request that you lay Senate File 3608 over for consideration in the omnibus tax bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With no further discussion, we will be laying over Senate File 3608 for possible inclusion in the Senate tax bill.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I would request that you adjourn the committee.
And we will be adjourned. Thanks.